The Iranians have capable armed forces. They have missile forces. They have shown the precision with which they are able to act against defended targets. But the key issue, I think, is that although the Iranians wish to support Hamas, they don't wish to do so at the expense of their own security.
Iran is a regional powerhouse supplying weapons and money to Hamas in Gaza, to Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Houthis in the Yemen. So it's got plenty of capability to hit out at anyone it blames for the attack that killed 95 people at a mosque inside Iran. It's not clear who planted the bombs near the tomb of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, who was killed 4 years ago by the Americans. Some suspect what is left of the group, known as Islamic State or even Al-Qaeda, were responsible. But Iran says there'll be a harsh response. And it just illustrates this point that we've been making this morning, that at the heart of much of what is going on in the Middle East, Iran is there as an influencer. We can speak now to Sir Richard Dalton, former UK ambassador to Iran. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
It is very striking, isn't it, that, and this is no more maybe than stating the obvious, that everywhere we turn in the Middle East, we are seeing actors backed by Iran.
Yes, that's true. In the turmoil in the Middle East, a great many states operate across their borders in order to defend or protect their interests. Israel is one, Saudi Arabia is another, Turkey, of course, in Syria, Russia in Syria, the United States in Iraq not so many years ago. It's a part of the world in which there's a constant flow of conflict, and Iran seeks to affect the outcomes of those conflicts in its own interests. And you're right, they are involved all over the place.
And what's their end game here? You know, they back Hezbollah in Lebanon, they back the Houthis in Yemen, that they back Hamas in Gaza, even though Hamas tend to be more Sunni and Iran is a Shia state. Is there a coherent plan here? What are they trying to achieve?
They're defending their own country. That's how they see it. They are exposed to threats of aggression by the United States, by Israel, and they support Hezbollah as the ultimate deterrent. They've been sanctioned by the United States, by all other countries now for 50 years. They have weak conventional forces, and they use their support for Hezbollah not just for ideological confrontation with Israel, but as a deterrent, because that massive arsenal that Hezbollah has could be launched if there is an existential threat to the Islamic Republic or to Iran's territory.
But why would there be an existential threat to Iran? No one seems to be on the border of Iran threatening to invade, did they?
That's a product of Iran's policies. Iran wishes to ensure that the United States leaves the region. Iran is ringed by bases of the United States, ringed by nuclear-armed countries, including the United States, with nuclear weapons in the region. And that state of tension, which we're, of course, extremely familiar with in Europe. If you'd asked in the 1930s who was a threat, you would be able to identify all kinds of people. And there was a balance of force which broke down eventually and led yet again to war. There is a balance of force in the Middle East which is unstable, and it's unstable partly because of the maintenance by Israel of its occupation of Palestinian territories and the continual upsurge of resistance from Palestinians to the injustice to which they've been exposed.
So what could it take? That's a really good analogy, that then, because that's the fear, isn't it? The fear is that this is already horrendous, and from a humanitarian point of view, it's you know, what has happened in Yemen is appalling. What's happened in Gaza is appalling as well. What could it take to break out into all-out war? Is all-out war, and I don't even know who'd be the parties to this war. What would it take to lead there?
I'm glad you mentioned Yemen, because, of course, the gross instability there is due to a civil war in which Western allies, with Western support, sought to intervene. That's Saudi Arabia and UAE. At present, I don't believe that a general war involving Iran, the United States, and Israel on several fronts is likely, because no party at present sees it as a fundamental interest to start such a conflict, which would have grave repercussions for the Gulf states. It would have grave repercussions, of course, for Lebanon. There is overwhelming United States force in the region, but they would sustain losses. The Iranians have capable armed forces. They have missile forces. They have shown the precision with which they are able to act against defended targets. But the key issue, I think, is that although the Iranians wish to support Hamas, they don't wish to do so at the expense of their own security.
Okay, and that their self-interest will maintain. I mean, Iran is a theocratic autocracy. It is a part of the world where it is very difficult to be a woman. We've seen all sorts of abuses that have taken place towards women in Iran. We've seen how it is a destabilizer in the region. Is there any scope or hope? We see protests rise and we see protests fall. Is the current theocracy in Iran stable? Is it something that's going to be there for the years and decades to come, or is there any chance of another revolution in that country?
No, there's a long democratic tradition in Iran which one day will be fulfilled, as I hope it will be also fulfilled in other autocracies in the region. But
how will that happen, Richard? I mean, because how will that ever get to the case?
Because the ideological drive for a theocratic regime is not shared by the majority of the Iranian people. As with other systems we've seen, communism, for example, a highly motivated minority can run a country for a prolonged period using all the force of state repression, which is open to so many other regimes in the Middle East as well as to Iran. But that will lose its force one day. The younger generations wish to live differently. They wish to live better. They wish to live at peace with the rest of the world, and they will make themselves felt. There's no chance of reform within the regime so long as the current supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, lives, but he's well into his 80s, and a moment of danger for the theocracy will occur when he dies.
And do you think the young Iranians will be willing to say, having grown up in a country that preaches the destruction of Israel, do you think there's a world in which an Iranian democracy can live at peace, recognizing the existence of Israel?
Absolutely. Even under the Iranian theocracy, if a solution is achieved by negotiation, which has been everyone's objective for so long, if that works, if the Palestinians accept it, if peace comes with high levels of acceptance within the Israeli-Palestinian world, then that would be accepted even by the theocracy. But yes, after the eventual fall of the Islamic Republic, there's no doubt whatsoever that provided Israel lives within its internationally recognized borders, it is not trying to control everything else between the internationally recognized borders of the Jordan River and Gaza. The young people, the middle-aged people, the Iranians as a whole will live with Israel.
Let's hope that can happen at some point. We will see how long it takes to get there. Richard Dalton, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
That's Richard Dalton there, the former UK ambassador to Iran.